Hi, my name's Matt. I'd like to welcome you to this Zindiac video, which is part of our MOR Management of Risk Foundation training course. In this video, we'll be covering some key terms related to management of risk, starting with risk, which is an uncertain event or set of events that, should it occur, will have an effect on the achievement of objectives. A risk is measured by the combination of the probability of a perceived threat or opportunity occurring and the magnitude of its impact on objectives. So let's start off by unpacking that a little bit for you. So the first thing to recognize is that a risk is an uncertain event and it can have a positive or negative effect on objectives. So if it has a positive, or if it could have a positive effect, then we refer to it as an opportunity. If it could have a negative effect, then we refer to it as a threat. Very often with the uncertainty, there's two or more possible outcomes, but there's generally positive outcomes and negative outcomes. So there are both opportunities and threats related to the same uncertainty. So when you take the exam, you may pass, which is the opportunity, or you may fail, which is the threat. The only way to avoid the threat of failure is to not take the exam, but then you would also be avoiding the opportunity of passing. So you want to take the exam so you can realize the opportunity, you can pass and get the certificate. You want to avoid the threat, and the mitigation actions, or the risk treatment actions that you take, such as following this course and preparing properly by taking the sample exams, will help make the positive outcome more likely to happen and the negative outcome less likely to happen. But there will always be that uncertainty. And as it says, it's the effect on objectives that we are interested in. So my broadband connection might fail. That's a possibility. Broadband connections fail from time to time. It could fail today. That wouldn't affect my objective of recording this course, because I don't need a broadband connection in order to record this course. If I want to upload it onto our website, then I do need a broadband connection, but I don't really need to do that today. I could do that when the broadband connection is back up and working. In worst case scenario, I could probably use 4G if I really needed to upload something today. So there's uncertainty about my broadband connection, but it wouldn't have an effect on my objectives in terms of what I'm doing today. It could future time. So that's a key thing to always consider, is can the uncertainty, even if the negative thing happens, can it affect your objectives, or how, at what point would it affect the objectives? That's a key thing to look out for. And then the magnitude. So what is the magnitude of its impact? How much is it going to affect those objectives? As I said, if I can't upload videos today, it's not that big a deal for me, so the magnitude of impact is small. If I couldn't upload my videos for a month, then that would be a different thing. That would be a much bigger impact on my objectives. And obviously, if I can't upload them, then I can't get the course accredited, then I can't sell the course. But I guess if you're watching it, we've overcome those potential, or we've avoided those potential risks. The second definition, issue, a relevant event that has happened, was not planned, and requires management action. It could be a problem, benefit, query, concern, change request, or risk that has occurred. So starting at the end, if a risk actually occurs, so if the risk I've identified, such as my broadband connection not working, it is working at the moment as far as I know, but if it stopped working, that would no longer be a risk. It would be an issue that I would have to deal with, and maybe ring up my broadband provider and get them to come out and fix it for me. So that would become an issue. but do recognise in terms of the definition of issue within MOR, it could be a problem or benefit. So in the same way as a risk can be a threat, a negative, potential negative event, or an opportunity, potential positive event, an issue can be a problem, an actual negative issue, or a benefit, a positive occurrence, a positive event that has happened. So again, when you take the exam and you get your result, that will be an issue under this definition, but it'll either be a problem if you failed or a benefit if you've passed. So that's important to recognise. So the key difference between a risk and an issue is a risk is something that might happen, an issue is something that has happened, but either one can be positive or negative. And that leads us nicely on to the definitions of threat and opportunity. So at a simple level, a threat is negative, an opportunity is positive. Threat, an uncertain event that could have a negative impact on objectives or benefits. Opportunity, an uncertain event that would have a favourable impact on objectives or benefits if it occurred. So you can see they're both related to risk. They're both types of risk because they're both uncertain, and that's the key definition for risk. But a threat is negative and an opportunity is positive. And we have three more key terms that we need to understand for risk management and for the exam, and these are corporate governance terms used in the MOR framework, starting with risk exposure, the extent of risk borne by the organisation at that time. And we may measure that in a number of ways. A common way that's you might see in your organisation is it might be the totality of all risk contingency in the organisation. So if we have risk contingency budgets for different projects, programs, for operations, and we add all that up, that's our total risk exposure. That's one way of measuring risk exposure. It's not the only way, but it's that total risk exposure, the total extent of risk borne by the organisation at any given point in time. Risk management, this is a definition really, you just need to be able to recognise it for the exam. Systematic application of principles, approach and processes to the tasks of identifying and assessing risks and then planning and implementing risk responses. So you need to be able to recognise that for the exam. It's also, in simple terms, a definition of what MOR is. MOR certainly consists of principles, the MOR approach, the MOR processes, as well as embedding and reviewing, which isn't mentioned there. But yes, identifying and assessing risks is part of the process, as is planning and implementing those risk responses. So really, their definition of risk management, not surprisingly, is what their risk management framework provides. And finally, corporate governance, the ongoing activity of maintaining a sound system of internal control by which the directors and officers of an organisation ensure that effective management systems, including financial monitoring and control systems, have been put in place to protect assets, earnings capacity, and the reputation of the organisation. And you can see, hopefully, from that definition how it relates to risk management, because we are trying to protect assets. And certainly when I deliver Resilia courses, which is based on cyber resilience, cyber security, that's very focused on looking at the asset and protecting assets and looking at threats to assets. So that's a slightly different approach to risk management. Rather than looking at uncertainty, it looks at the things you want to protect, and that's very much what corporate governance is doing. As you can see there, protect assets, earnings capacity and reputation. And really the reputation of an organisation is an asset. Earnings capacity is an asset, so it's protecting assets, but it's focused on the asset and the threats to the asset and vulnerabilities that threats might exploit to compromise the asset. So that's a different way of approaching risk management, but it can be useful as we move through the course using that approach as a check, if nothing else. So yes, focusing on uncertainty and what oh, there's uncertainty, this might happen, that might happen. That's one way of approaching risk management, an important way and probably the key way for MOR, but also focusing on the assets, threats to those assets and vulnerabilities that the threats might exploit. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video. We've looked at some key terms, 7 key terms that you need to know for the exam, but also to provide that foundation for management of risk. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. Please join me in the next video. Until you see me again, have a great day.